thank him. So welcome to the Church of Jesus Christ. I pray that the Lord blesses you in every way possible. But if one of those ways is through the message, then we give God all the honor and glory because I completely depend upon his inspiration for messages. And I struggle to believe that I might have created something myself, and that's my biggest concern. And I don't want to use the word fear, but it might be appropriate. So we'll just say we're going to turn the service over to the Lord and pray that you're blessed in it. Question for you. And if you want to open your mic and throw an answer out, a guess out, you're certainly welcome to do so, or any of you here locally, if you want to give an answer. Who do you believe in the history of recorded history? This is just someone's claim and guess. Who do you think was the first person given credit to being a self-made person? Self-made man, so I'll give you a hint. We'll eliminate some of the gender right off the bat. The first person to be called a self-made man. And by self-made, it by definition, self-made means having become successful by one's own efforts. Who do you think it was? I was prepared to do a multiple. Oh, go ahead. Who?
David.
It's not biblical. It was in real time. It was someone in real time. Sorry, my bad. I asked a bad question and didn't give enough hints. It was someone who was claimed to be in real time, and it's much more current, the last 400 years or so. In the Americas. Yeah, too big a question, I know. Yeah,
Henry Ford.
Again. Who?
Henry Ford.
Henry Ford's a great answer. That's a great answer.
Great answer, but I think it's the oil guy. Great
answer. That means it doesn't matter which oil guy you're picking. It wasn't. So I'm
the one from Ohio. Oh, can't remember his name.
Bob. I don't. It wasn't. I'm telling you, that's not who it was. So I'm helping you. Don't struggle. Don't stress. It was
Benjamin Franklin.
It was what did you say?
Benjamin Franklin.
Yes, it was. It was Benjamin Franklin.
Interesting.
Awesome.
Well, he had that.
Go ahead.
He had that kind of attitude, so I get it.
Okay. I'm going to share a little bit about not even much about Benjamin Franklin, but about what self-made means. And I have certainly used that phrase, not necessarily for self, but I've used that phrase before as well. I'll meet someone or come across someone that I will claim is self-made. They are self-made success. They're a self-made millionaire. They're a self-made businessman. They're a self-made person, whatever it might be, male, female, whoever it might be. It really began from financially distressed beginnings or originations. People who didn't have the same opportunities maybe that others did, and they climbed out of whatever that starting point was, and they become successful, whatever successful means. But those are those who have been given credit for being self-made. It seems today, even more than anything else, the moniker is given by self. So they are self-made, successful people. They make claims to have this same start. I'm going to counter just a bit with a story or two to give you maybe a couple of options that may or may not counter your thoughts on this. I'm sorry, searching for something right now and not finding it. Okay. I can't find it up here. There we go. As soon as I it makes noise. There it is. Sorry for the pause. So sorry for the pause. I may have told this story on a Tuesday night before, but probably 3 years ago, Kylie and I, my son and I, worked on his porch, building his porch. And he was subjected to, because I was working for free, and I felt it important that I work under the joys of my own choosing. So I played my music while we worked on the porch, and he was subjected to music from the 1970s while we worked on the porch, and much conversation around that. I am teasing about the being subjected to because my kids grew up listening to many different genres, but certainly my own as far as what I grew up under. So we would talk daily about the music, and I would rant on how his music today was built on the shoulders of the musicians of my time, giving, by the way, no credence to the music in the 50s or the 40s that our music was built on. I was just claiming origination and saying how Kylie's music was built on ours, and it became fun. It became a fun exchange between us. And then one day I showed up for work, and he said, "Dad, you're not going to believe what happened yesterday." He said, "I've been teasing you and pushing against you on your terrible music and your terrible music choices." He said, "And I listened to one of my favorite musicians, and that beginning," and he asked me to play a song. I played it again. He goes, "That one." And then he played one of his songs and said, "Listen to the beginning." It was the same introduction, same riff. And in that moment, he became a convert to the fact that maybe there's no origination. Maybe everything is built on everything. This week, we watched Detroit Lions. And I want to say that both individuals I'm going to tell you about, their jerseys are up on my wall in my basement downstairs. So I've been cheering for the Lions quietly for as long as I can remember, they being one of the only two teams that have not been in the modern day Super Bowl. While both these teams, Cleveland Browns and the Detroit Lions, were dominant in the early years, 40s, 50s especially, and even into the 60s, it seemed the minute they instituted the Super Bowl, their team shut down, and they stopped winning, and they stopped knowing how to win. So it's been painful for these teams. So we watched the Detroit Lions on Monday night, I think is when they played, and cheered for them. We were cheering for them to win this game. And at halftime, there was an interview. And the interview was between Marshawn Lynch and Barry Sanders. And I'm not positive you could have two running backs. I don't know if you all know football or the NFL, but I'm not certain you could have two running backs who ran differently than these two individuals. And yet, Marshawn Lynch was fawning all over Barry Sanders. He was saying greatest ever. He got all choked up at the beginning of the interview. He stumbled and bumbled through it. He was like a little kid looking for an autograph with a hero. And it was delightful to see these two very, very successful men showing such respect and love for one another. But what Marshawn Lynch said is, I was a running back because of you. I saw you run, and I thought, I want to be like you, which was just such a beautiful moment for me to see these men. And so I began to wonder if self-made is even anywhere near accurate as a statement. Told you before, self-made is by definition success based upon one's efforts. And my question today is, does that even exist? Given my story with Kylie, given my example with these two really successful football players, but it goes on. You'll read about authors who write things and they'll talk about their inspirations. You have your own. I began to think about myself and yesterday, as I was feeling inspired in this message, I began to think about myself. My early days, I thought I was going to be a cabinet maker. My dad was a cabinet maker. And so I really believed that I would take over his business. And I can remember people like George, who you'll never meet. I don't know that he's still on this earth. People like Howard, people like Glenn, and certainly my dad. All of these individuals and more, and so many more, taught me everything I knew about cabinets. And maybe I had my own flair about building cabinets or installing cabinets, but all of it learned and maybe adjusted by other people, nothing on my own. Began to think about my start in financial advising and the individuals in my life who, again, had influence. People like Neil. Again, you'll not meet these people. People like Richard, people like Chuck, who were my mentors of sort, at least my managers, and the influence they had. But I also think about other people who were in the business ahead of me, who may have shared an idea or two with me. All of them having influence in my life, all of them. So to say I was self-made in either or would have been silly, in that I didn't just fall out of the sky and start making cabinets. I didn't just fall out of the sky and start helping people with their investments. So in maybe everything all of us do, there are individuals who influence us, whether knowingly or not. Thought about my spiritual life and those individuals who, those brothers who and sisters who had such influence in my life. The first and foremost, my mother, Dennis, Eugene, John, and Paul. All of these individuals having effect, and more, by the way. I'm naming maybe my top 5, but so many more. Maybe just in a conversation with you, one of you. Maybe a sit down at our house with Jimmy and Candace, and conversations going on, and me picking up something sticking to me from that conversation. I've told you before how Brother Jim and I had lunch after lunch after lunch, all Olive Garden lunches, if I even remember accurately. Nothing lost in those meetings. I can't tell you what we talked about, but listen to me speak. Something I'm going to say is a Jim Millerism, and it comes out without our knowing. So, is anybody self-made? Our theme today is self-made seems self-centered. Self-made seems self-centered. Is there accuracy to the phrase self-made? We choose, or not, what to stick to, what to learn from, what not to learn from. All of the individuals I named may have been subject to teaching me how to, but they also may have been subject to teaching me how not to. Maybe on a style issue, I'm not as strong as some of these individuals I named. I probably couldn't be as direct or forceful as some of those individuals were, and they were very good in that approach. It just doesn't work for me, and so I learned how not to in some cases. I think of my management style. It wasn't just individuals I knew. It was orators. It was authors of books that I read. And it goes on and on and on. I say me, not to put focus on me. I say me to take the focus off you so that no one feels uncomfortable. Oh, no, he's not going to tell a story about me, is he? So I'm learning to be safer and use myself as the example. Bad example, most likely, and maybe something that accidentally I stumbled upon, but it's not about me. So words that I thought about is those individuals influenced us. They impacted us. They maybe introduced different things to us. They inspired us, either to or not to. Both are equally powerful. I think about my father and my mother with child rearing. And often I paint one in better terms than the other, but I want to make certain I say this today. Both taught me so many beautiful things about parenting, about life. And they both taught me some things not to do about parenting and about life. So again, we learn how to and how not to from each other. All good. But by doing so, if we accept my theory, if we accept what I'm saying, then we have to accept that self-made as a terminology is self-centered. Because there are impactful influences in our lives, but none greater than the influence of God and or Jesus Christ. And that's where I wanted us to travel to this morning. I know this, that if Candace and I sit in the same room and listen to someone, as you're doing right now, all of you, Candace and I will take different things from what we hear. And those things may inspire us differently. If I even remember what she heard, she may repeat later, how about when he said, or how about when she said, or how about in that song? And I'll think, it flew right past me. And so it is that it's not just, it's a wrestling match for me this morning. It's not just what we hear, but how we hear it. Following, right? It's not just who says it, but maybe how they say it, or even when they say it. I've noticed this, spewing wisdom at my children as they grew up. Often it just flew by them. And then the next day, someone would say something, they may come home, here's what someone said, and I think, I just told you that yesterday. And it wasn't just when, it was who. I was just noise. Charlie Brown's parents, wop, 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 wop. They didn't even hear it. But when someone else said it, it connected. That's okay. Influences. Here would be the challenge to identify. By the way, here, let me start again. Here would be the impossible challenge to identify everything, everybody, everywhere, every way that you've been influenced and touched by the words of others, by the actions of others, by the deeds of others. I think of the hours spent in my different homes, talking to different individuals and all that was shared. I could never recollect everything that I gleaned, that I was the benefactor from in those conversations and in those beautiful moments of my life. And so it is. I am nowhere near self-made in any facet of my life. I present that as my theory. I present that as some of my evidence. And I invite you to embrace my theory this morning, that the terminology, the mindset that self-made is self-centered. Much more selfless, much more generous is to consider the beautiful things that you've learned, whether they were how to or how not to. I am very, very thankful for what I learned not to do, as much so as what I learned to do. I think it's a funny story. I tell a story about the time I went in as a manager to visit with one of my reps in a bank setting. And they were taking pieces of paper and they were folding them. They sent some words inside and they were folding them and stapling them with a raw staple on them, putting a stamp and an address on them and mailing them to their clients, not in an envelope. And I was horrified. Oh, no. And I started to tell them how a better way to do this. And the individual told me, oh, I just had one of these people come in yesterday and I opened an account and they explained what they just did. Took the next piece of paper myself. I started folding and stapling. I've learned how to and how not to from many people. We are all influenced. We are all creations of experiences of our lives. And so before I say anything else, I want to thank all of you who have touched my life in one way or the other to help me get closer and closer and closer and closer to my end point, which is the paradise of God. And each of you having that influence in my life to help me get there. With no insult intended, teaching me how to and teaching me how not to do things. And for all of that, I'm thankful. I'm going to read you a couple verses. I'm going to remind you, before I do so, of the mentors that you've read in the Word. There was no Joshua without Moses. If you remember, Moses never got into the promised land. Do you remember that story? Struck the rock, water, and took the credit. So God said, I think this is where we'll stop with your journey. Thank you so much for coming. Thanks for playing, but we're not going to play any longer. And Joshua took the last half. I don't know if you've ever seen a relay race, but usually the first three are good runners. And then they hand off the last leg to lightning, and it just runs around. And the fourth runner normally in a relay race is the fastest. Joshua took that baton and took them into the promised land. Moses mentoring Joshua. And the story goes on and on. How many mentors we read in the scriptures throughout. We have been doing our summer book club, cheesy commercial to try to get you on Tuesday nights to join us. But we've been doing our summer book club every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Zoom, the same way you Zoom today. Sorry, I have to do the commercial. Come join us. But the author probably most highlighted this summer has been Paul. And when I say Paul, if you've been on any of those Tuesday nights, you immediately go to Timothy in your mind. Paul mentored Timothy. Paul tells an experience of 3 years after his conversion, of being in the desert for 3 years, being mentored, not by anyone in the flesh, being mentored by Jesus Christ. Another time he said he was called up into the third heavens. I don't know where that is. I don't know what that is. But being called up into the third heavens, being taught and mentored. Here's what we know. He's mentored you as well. Jesus the Christ has mentored you and remains available for more mentoring through his Holy Spirit. He promised his people that he had to leave in the fleshly form. He had to leave in order to send what is most critical to his people, his Spirit. Why? Because our spirit is an enemy, is clashing with God. It works against him. Our natural spirits push against him. To be certain, so that we understand the opportunity we've been given. The word also says that the Spirit of Christ, unlike the Holy Ghost, the word says the Spirit of Christ has been given to every single person born onto this earth. I believe that's the little spark in you. Okay, this little flame that burns from the time you're innocent and pure. There is no question when you hold a baby. Yesterday, we went to see little William play a soccer game. And his little brother, Luca, was there. William's still innocent and pure and good. Luca, like gold. He's how old, Candace? Help me. 4, 5 months. 5 months old, pure. If you're in a bad mood, hold a baby. If you had a really rough time, just hold a baby and watch your whole temperament change. The Spirit of Christ is given to all. I say that because I think the Spirit of Christ is purest in those babies. I don't know when it begins, but we start blowing that flame down with time. And when it's almost out, that's when we find Jesus Christ and he infuses his Spirit within us. The mind of the Father and the Son is given to us, connects back to the Spirit of Christ, lights up, and now we have access to his mentorship so that we understand. We have access to his influence. We have access to his impactful influence, his inspiration. That's our walk with the Lord. I'm going to read you a couple verses so that we understand that self-made is self-made. The term self-made is self-made. It doesn't exist. It's our arrogance. Forgive me, I judge no one, I judge everyone. You understand what I mean? Not specifically anyone, and generally everybody. Anybody who believes themselves to be self-made doesn't mean you didn't have effect. You didn't make wonderful choices. You didn't work hard. I'm not saying any of that. But I'm saying the term self-made is an absolute, and there is no absolute self-made. It's self-indulgence. It's self-centeredness. Jesus Christ said this, I am the vine, you are the branches. He that abides in me, that's that Spirit that I told you about, and I in him. The same bring forth much fruit, for without me, you can do nothing. Interpretation. Jesus said, self-made is self-centered. It's impossible. There is no self-made. Isaiah writes this, recording the word of the Lord that he heard. For I, the Lord thy God, will hold thy right hand, saying unto thee, fear not, I will help thee. What God was telling Isaiah to write this down, Isaiah. Self-made is self-centeredness. I will help you. Call on my name. I'll help you. I'll influence you. I'll impact you. I'll change you. I'll direct you. I'll guide you. The psalmist writes this. Oh, and I'm so sorry I didn't give John 15:5 and in Isaiah 41:13. My apologies. Psalms 23, the first two verses. You know this verse, these verses. You know, the Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. I shall not want for anything. If I allow the Lord to shepherd me, to direct me gently, to guide me. Shepherds don't strike. They use their staff to gently guide. They use the hook. When you slip and fall down the cliff, down your spiritual life, down your natural life, they use that hook gently to bring you back up to center. Never striking, always guiding with love. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. Do you want peace? Do you want stillness? Do you want guidance? Do you want a surety? Follow his lead. The psalmist writes this. Self-made is self-centeredness. Proverbs says this. Proverbs just gem after gem after gem after gem. It is exhausting to read Proverbs. Hear what I'm saying to you. It is exhausting to read Proverbs like a novel or like a history book or like a nonfiction book gathering information. It just comes at you too much. One verse after another is exhausting because I just want to. Sometimes Candace will make a dessert. And if you have not had dessert at Candace's house, you are missing, like Proverbs, you are missing this deliciousness that just comes bite after bite. And I often tell her I'm like a dog. If you put food in front of me, I just need it. I just need it. And I have to learn to slow down and just savor. And that's what Proverbs is like. I sometimes read Proverbs like I eat Candace's desserts way too fast and not stopping and pausing and enjoying the deliciousness of what I'm reading. So I'm going to read you one so that you can taste it and enjoy it and savor it. Trust in it, and this is Proverbs 3, verse 5. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart. Lean not on thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he will direct thy paths. If you go to the different interpretations, if you ever go online and you'll see the different multiple interpretations, keep going down to the bottom. The last interpretation writes Proverbs 3 this way. Self-made is self-centeredness. It's the same thing. Same thing I just read to you. Give in. Allow the Lord to influence you. Give in. Allow for the Lord's inspiration. Give in. Allow for his teaching to direct your path. None of us self-made, and it's okay. All of us walking through when I was young in Florida, I can remember we had a camp out in Central Florida. And Brother Nicky Persico and I drove up together and we were driving home together. And across the way was a field, just an open field, not fenced in, didn't seem to be owned, just free trees in South Florida. There are so many orange trees that they grow free. When I delivered, I was a delivery person for a company, I knew where all the tangerine trees were, all the orange trees were. If I was going north, I knew where the trees were. If I was going south, I knew where they were. I would stop. And I would open my t-shirt. I would take my t-shirt out and I'd open my shirt and I'd start dropping tangerines or fruit or oranges in my t-shirt. Go to my van, I'd drop them into, I had a little box, my little fruit box that sat by my chair, my seat, and I'd drop them in there. And the rest of the day I was fed. Nikki and I, after this camp out, we had enjoyed just a delicious camp. I thought, how do we celebrate this? Tangerines. And so we went into this field and we gathered too many tangerines. But all the way home, we enjoyed those. I remember that like it was yesterday, talking and giggling about how delicious our lunch was. We didn't stop at a McDonald's. We didn't stop at a Burger King. We were eating tangerines all the way home. That was Sunday. Monday was a whole different story. Need not bring it into this sermon, but just know the effects of buckets of tangerines are great. And so understanding that influence, impact comes in all forms, as it is in our lives. So I want to finish this message with how I started. I thank God for each one of you. Some of you influenced me hundreds of times. Some of you influenced me tens of times. Some of you influenced me maybe once. But I thank him as loudly for you as I do for anyone else. By the way, I don't know which of you touched me 100 times. I don't know which of you touched me tens of times. I don't know which of you touched me just once. I don't know what stuck and what didn't. But I know sometimes when I spew, it's your words that I'm spewing. Sometimes when I have a thought, it's not an original thought. It's something you inspired. But mostly, it's the inspiration of God. And so mostly I want to thank God that I'm not self-made. I want to thank God that I have nothing to claim as my own. But instead that those around me have carried me when I was low, picked me up when I was struggling, put their arms under me when I was limping. Friday night we had a game. One of my boys that I made sure played. He quit us last year, and I never stopped tapping on him, texting him. I'd see him at games last year, and I kept saying, "I want you back. Come back. Come back." He plays this year. In the middle of the game, he was down on the field, and my first thought, it's my fault. Had he not come back, he wouldn't be down on that field. So I got out on the field and I carried him to the sideline. I stayed with him. Unfortunately, we had to have medical care come. It wasn't an injury to his legs or anything. He had a concussion. And it got worse and worse and worse as I sat with him on the sideline, behind the sideline. Our trainer wasn't there, so I was trainer for that moment. And as we talked, he got further and further and further from me. And I was thinking about my influence. I was thinking about my impact in this young person's life. And how my words, my text, my encouragement had him on that field, and now he's down. And today I want to say I praise God. The report I've received on this young man, all is well. And so for the moment I was swirling because of influence. So I realize that influence is positive, influence is negative, influence is robust, influence is small. It's all the above. But nobody is left to claim being self-made. All of us are made up of our experiences with one another, but mostly with God. He is our guide. Jesus Christ, when I least deserved it. Jesus Christ, when I least desired it, reached out and called me into his fold. I remember believing with all that I was that I had chosen him. only to learn that I didn't even do that. I didn't even do that. He chose me. And all I did was open the door when he knocked. So I can't even claim to have gone to the door, opened the door, searched to find him, found him, invited him into my home. I didn't do any of that. I just opened the door when he knocked. Why he knocked on my door, I don't know. I don't struggle with it anymore. I used to struggle with the worthiness of that. And the reason I don't struggle anymore is I can't rectify. I can't come to a decision. I can't give you an answer. Certainly wasn't deservedness, certainly wasn't worthiness. I am blessed beyond measure because of the influence of Jesus Christ. I am nowhere near self-made, but instead the benefactor of all of you and the Lord himself, most importantly. How do I ever repay? Simply this: I listen to what the Lord Jesus Christ said to me, to you, to those who are inquiring. Love God, I can repay that. Love others, I can repay you. Self-made is self-centeredness. Accept this, that you are who you are, the beautiful person you are, because of God's influence, the touch of Jesus Christ, and the people of God also having an effect on you. May the Lord bless each one of you as you carry all of that forward to touch others.